Hey everybody, it's Sam Beebe. Today is Friday, November 15th, 2019. I'm Barb Hammer. I haven't been doing very many videos lately. I'm sorry. I'm still following lots of events going on in Hong Kong. Um, Still following that, other things. Uh, but I've been really focused on Bolivia since, I guess, last weekend when shit really hit the fan. And Evo Morales was um, forced to resign as president of Bolivia. So I haven't been doing a lot of videos lately. I'm very distracted with things here. So we're getting ready for some demolition and renovation work here in the apartment, and it's because there was a flooding situation upstairs. And things are a mess and disorganized, and we've had to clear things out. We have to clear even more things out. So we know what's going on a little bit better now, and so the apartment has to be vacated for a week while they do the demolition and renovation work. I won't be here. I've been planning a trip too. That's another distraction. But anyway, so I'm very disturbed about what's going on in Bolivia. The U.S. government has always had Bolivia and other leftist governments, countries with leftist governments on its target list and been targeting. And so they found an opportunity in Bolivia, and this has been going on for a while. I've been undermining him for years, really. Found an opportunity, claimed he had rigged the election and was not the legitimate president, they're claiming, but it's all just fabricated. And they forced him to resign. And there's another Juan. There's a female Juan Guaido, like in Venezuela and Bolivia, a lady in the legislature who's declared herself president. And so things are very scary there. People are being killed and wounded, and being rounded up, disappearing. And Cuban doctors have been arrested and charged with terrorism because Cuba sends doctors to other countries to help out with their healthcare systems. So Evo Morales is a leftist leader, and he has done a lot of good for the people there. It's a very poor country, but he has improved the lives of the people there. Um, he's used the resources there to improve the lives of people there. He has seized mining operations. He has nationalized a lot of the resources, and he has tried to renegotiate new contracts with companies in Russia and in China to get a better deal. And this is why the U.S. does not like Evo Morales. They want U.S. business interests to dominate in the world, especially in Latin America. So it's the old Monroe Doctrine. So this is U.S. territory, Latin America. And so, see, there's a China connection there. So there's a very important China connection there. And China is the number one target of the U.S. in its new Cold War. And it is considered the biggest threat in the world. And so Evo Morales was negotiating with China over its minerals, especially lithium, which is a key resource for making batteries for technology, including electric cars. And so that's why they don't like Evo negotiating with countries that are rivals to the US, such as Russia and China. So anyway, it's very scary situation in Bolivia, and Evo Morales was actually very lucky to get out alive. So as soon as he was forced to resign, he didn't really have much of a choice. It was very likely that he would be arrested, and so they kind of they've already said they want to arrest him. He's outside the country, fortunately, but the government, the new regime in Bolivia, has said that they want to arrest him, and that would not end well. And unlike Evo, in 1973, Salvador Allende did not make it out alive. So there was a U.S. military coup against him. And on September 11th, 1973, he died. And they were virtually bombing the palace where he was. And so he was killed. They claimed he committed suicide, but I think he was just killed. So Evo Morales was lucky to get out alive. And it was very complicated, the whole procedure to get him out. And so I saw a very interesting timeline. There's a couple of outlets that have talked about this. So I just want to talk to you about how complicated it is in a situation, how tense it can be, and how there's a lot of diplomatic negotiating that has to go on. And so he just barely got out, really, as far as I'm concerned. So the new Mexican president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, he offered asylum to Evo Morales, either on Sunday or Monday morning for sure. So Evo Morales, he accepted. He then asked, so it was offered. Evo Morales asked, said yes, he would like asylum in Mexico. So then the Mexican government had to make the arrangements, and that's when things got really complicated. So there's this is an RT report, but my main source for this is this Spanish language article, and this is digital translation. It's a little rough, but you can make sense of it, or I was able to make sense of it. So that's a picture of Evo Morales saying goodbye to his supporters at the military airport outside of La Paz where he was picked up. But anyway, so I'm just going to go through. I want to show you how complicated it is. I just thought it was interesting. I hope you find this interesting. So this is an account that the Mexican foreign minister gave, and he talked about how they got Evo Morales out of Bolivia on Monday evening, rather. So there was a Mexican Air Force Gulfstream, so that's like a little private jet, that took off from Mexico City. And I will show you on a map. I'll have to go back and forth a little bit here, so bear with me. So it's hard to get Bolivia and Mexico on the same screen because this was quite the trip. So up here at the top, there's Mexico. Here's Mexico City. So the Gulfstream took off from Mexico City, and they got permission to land. So they flew over international waters, so they didn't have to get permission. If you fly over land, you have to get permission from all these countries, and it's shorter anyway. So they flew over the ocean down here to Peru, and this is Lima, Peru. Okay, so then once they got there, they got permission. I'm just going to check here, but I believe they got permission. Yeah. So they landed in Lima here. So they had to wait in Lima. They had to wait for authorization to fly into Bolivia. And at that time, they didn't know who they were dealing with or who was making this decision. So whatever the Bolivian authorities they contacted authorized them to fly into Bolivia. But so I'll show you again on the map here. So they took off, and once they got into Bolivian airspace, or just entered Bolivian airspace, they got word that the permission to enter the country was withdrawn, was no longer valid. So the plane, I'll show you again. So they took off from Lima, and so they're headed to, I think I have to move this up, and I gotta zoom in here. Yeah, okay. This is better. So they started to enter Bolivian airspace, and La Paz, the capital, So they were headed just outside of La Paz somewhere. Is near the border with Peru. So just as they were entering Bolivian airspace, the permission to enter Bolivian airspace was withdrawn. So they had to return back to Lima then. Okay. Now, then they got, let's see. Yeah. So they had to, I think, negotiate. So they went back to Lima, and so it took a number of hours. So they're working from. So they got the Mexican ambassador in La Paz, Bolivia, to negotiate with the Bolivian officials, and this undersecretary that's probably another Mexican official, and this is the Mexican foreign minister. So they're negotiating with the Bolivian officials, trying to get permission to land. So then they get permission again. So this is the Bolivian Air Force Command then grants them permission to enter Bolivian airspace, to come to fly and land in Bolivia. So the plane arrives at the Bolivian airport where Evo Morales is waiting. And okay, so the plane is in this area in Bolivia, and Evo Morales is on the plane. Okay, so the plan is to go back to Lima, go back the way they came. Well, doesn't work out that way. So while they're there, and now this is the dangerous part because Evo Morales is on the plane, so he's political baggage. Anyway, so so they wanted to go back to Lima to refuel because it's a long flight. So they were hoping to refuel there for the long flight back to Mexico. And then, back over international waters again. So let's see. So it's 7:30 on Monday, 7:30 in the evening Mexican time. And I think it's maybe probably a couple hours later. So the Peruvian foreign ministry tells them, well, we've had a change of heart, and so they're not going to let the plane fly back to Lima, Peru, and refuel. So things are very tense at the airport. So Evo Morales is on the plane, and his followers are outside the plane, and they're actually in the terminal. There are Bolivian troops, and very tense. Things were very tense. So they had to come up with a plan B. So then the Mexican foreign minister talks to his Paraguayan counterpart, the Paraguayan foreign minister, to figure out a way, some place to go to get out of Bolivia. And they don't want to go straight back to Mexico. They're hoping to refuel, I think, or maybe refuel, but they need to just get out of Bolivia, somewhere to go to get out of somewhere nearby. And then apparently Alberto Fernandez, who is the president-elect of Argentina, he got involved too, and he's talking to the president of Paraguay. So Mexican foreign minister is talking about Paraguayan foreign minister, and at the same time, the Argentine president-elect, Fernandez, is talking to the president of Paraguay. Yeah, so Paraguay agrees, and they say, okay, the plane can land in Asuncion, which is the capital of Paraguay. So the Paraguayan foreign minister, he knows that things are tense. It's a tense situation. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to anybody. And so they fly to, let's see. Okay. So I'll show you on the map. So they're just trying to get, right now, they're just trying to get to Asuncion. So here's Asuncion down here. So the plane is in this area, La Paz. Bolivia. So they're just trying to get, so they're trying to go southeast into Paraguay to Asuncion, just as a stopover until they figure out how to get Ava back to Mexico. So I guess that's it. They're just trying to figure out one thing at a time, one thing at a time. Okay, so the plane is still on the ground in Bolivia. And so they've got to get permission to take off from the airport, or they have to get permission from Bolivia to take off. So the Mexican ambassador in Bolivia is working with the local officials in Bolivia, and unfortunately, the Bolivian Air Force at that time was threatening not to let the plane take off. But then they got permission. It sounds like there was a very narrow window of opportunity. So they just took off, when there was just a little, okay, can't waste any time. So they got out. So the plane goes to Asuncion in Paraguay. And so then because Peru is not going to let them land in Lima, they asked, well, can we fly over Peru? So they have to get permission to cross Peruvian airspace. And so the Peruvian government agrees. So, okay, so the plane, the plane is taken off from Bolivia and it flies to Asuncion, and there they ask again, well, can they fly over Peruvian airspace? They're assuming, the other thing is they're assuming they're going to be able to fly over Bolivia. So, okay, so they're in Paraguay trying to get back, they're trying to reach the ocean, international waters or international airspace. So Peru says, okay, you can cross our airspace. And so they're concerned about fuel. So the plane, or the Mexican officials, they ask Ecuador if they need to refuel, can they stop over in Ecuador to refuel? So Ecuador says, yeah, okay, you can refuel if you need to. Okay, so the plane is here and it's trying to get up. So Ecuador. Okay, so because they're allowed to cross Peruvian airspace so far, so they want to get up to, so this is, they were told, the Ecuadorian government said, oh yeah, if you need to refuel, you can stop at this place, and it's called Guayaquil. Yeah. So not the capital, but so there must be an airport or something landing, something there, where they can possibly refuel if necessary. But then, and then the Ecuadorian government, they said later, according to this RT report, later, so this report had a couple of other things, wrenches that were thrown in. So Ecuador then later said no, and then I think they said okay again. So that was dodgy. And also, as they were negotiating, so I think the Mexican officials were negotiating with a number of countries in the area, and they got an okay. Oh no, Chile said no. Chile said, no way, you're not flying over Chile to get to international airspace. So they're still, okay, at this point, they're still stuck in Asuncion. So they're trying to get the okay to get over Peruvian airspace up to Ecuador, and if need be, refuel. So anyway, I don't know if it's before they find out, then Bolivia is not going to let them fly over, enter Bolivian airspace on the return trip. So then there's more negotiating, And yeah, so the diplomats they start negotiating again. So yeah, so Bolivia reports it no longer authorizes the plane to enter, to get into Peruvian airspace. So okay, the Brazilian ambassador in Bolivia gets involved. Um, and the Mexican ambassador in Brasilia gets involved. And so they're all talking to each other. And so they figure out that um, so they're going to supposedly negotiated that the plane would be allowed to fly. I think it ended up flying into Brazilian airspace. It got permission. Um, so it went. They said it went along the border, but it's hard to just stay along the border here. So I think they were actually flying um, in Brazilian airspace here along here to get around Bolivia. They couldn't fly over Bolivia, so they had to go all the way around, and then they were able to cross. So they got around, and instead of chancing it and stopping off in Ecuador, um, I think they thought they had enough fuel, so um, they had enough fuel, so they didn't want to chance Ecuador saying no, you can't land here. So this is in the middle of the night, so long hours. Is this took hours, and I'm sure it was very stressful for everybody involved. So, like, this is in the middle of the night, so they're flying back, so they had to fly all the way around Bolivia, and I guess they crossed. I mean, I think they try to just get out into international airspace as soon as they can. So let's zoom out here again. Yeah. Okay. So they were all the way down here in Paraguay. They had to fly all the way around. So they crossed Peruvian airspace into international airspace over the water. And they made it back to Mexico. They made it to Mexico City with Evo Morales on the plane. So they arrived in Mexico City at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was an all night thing. So it was a long, long night, exhausting, very stressful, I'm sure. But Evo made it, and this is him in Mexico City, arriving at the airport. So he's safe, and things are not good in Bolivia at all. It's really a shame. Like, as you know, no government is perfect, and if you want to pick at Evo Morales and his presidency, these little he was doing so much good for the people there. And the only thing he did wrong, really, was he threatened U.S. business interests. And that's why he's out. The U.S. wanted him out. It's not that the Bolivian people wanted him out. Um, he won that election in the first round. And it was amazing that he won that election and won 47%, because there were election irregularities and there were marked ballots for him, votes for him, that are found on the streets in some of the rural areas, I think. And there's a lot of details about that election and the reporting of it and what has been found to be dodgy about it, but that's bullshit. I'm calling bullshit because I've looked into that. And so, I mean, they were trying desperately to undermine his whole campaign. There was violence before. They were even trying to rig the polling to discourage people from voting. There was voter suppression. Um, Evo Morales left his government, a threat to the U.S. business interests. And don't forget China. China's a big thing, and the minerals, lithium especially. So there's a lot of things that were going on in Bolivia, but he was a threat to U.S. business interests, and they wanted him out, and so they got him out, and other leftist governments, countries in the area are watching this very closely, and there's reasons that they were able to get him out, and they haven't been able to get other governments out like that. But um, I just you to see how tricky it was to get Evo Morales safely out of the country. You know, he was a marked man, and they really had the knives out for him, and he was lucky to get out. Anyway, Salvador Allende was not so lucky in 1973. So anyway, I hope you appreciate everything that was involved in getting Evo Morales out of the country and safely into Mexico. And it's really a godsend that he had somebody like Mexican President um, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador to offer him asylum. Anyway, so that's it for now. I'm going to be talking a lot more about Bolivia and what was going on before the elections, during the elections, and why. So, you know, there's a big China factor, the lithium, the minerals and lithium, especially. And I saw the Off Guardian, they had an article saying that so the U.S. is known for its wars for oil, and this is now there's a military coup, a coup for green energy or something. So yeah, those minerals and business interests. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for your patience, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.